The Apollo missions are arguably still the most impressive space venture mankind has ever undertaken. From 1961 to 1972, NASA undertook 14 missions, the success of which saw humans walk on the moon for the first time and set a new bar for space exploration. While most people are familiar with Neil Armstrong and the Apollo 11 crew, who were the first men to walk on lunar terrain, fewer are as well versed with the successor mission. Apollo 12 was an equally successful landing in the same year. However, while the onboard trio returned home within a fortnight, another integral part of the mission would circle back to Earth 30 years later. The following video takes a look at that particular bit of history as we look to uncover this mysterious journey. Let's get started! 1969 was certainly a busy year for NASA. First up was the continued trials of the Saturn V rocket, which launched its second crewed flight during Apollo 9 in March. The Command and Service Module and Lunar Module also made their maiden flights to Earth orbit and successfully showcased the onboard life support system that was to aid missions on the moon. Apollo 10 would follow 2 months later. Thomas Stafford, Eugene Cernan, and John Young were the crew chosen for the mission, an 8-day dress rehearsal for the moon landing. This time, the Lunar Module was flown to an altitude of 50,000 feet above the moon's surface. Next up was the big one. On July 16, 1969, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins set off to make history on Apollo 11. Armstrong and Aldrin became the first men to walk on the moon, spending 21 hours and 36 minutes on our planet's natural satellite. However, Apollo 11 was not to be the last major mission of the year. Apollo 12, which took off on the 14th of November, was the next lunar venture. Commander Charles Conrad was accompanied by Alan L. Bean and Richard F. Gordon as a Saturn V SA-5007 propelled the 2 space modules back to the moon. However, just 36 seconds into the mission, the launch vehicle was struck by lightning, causing the controllers to lose telemetry. Lightning struck again 16 seconds later, but the Saturn V would not be stopped, and it carried the modules and the men into initial Earth orbit. The SIVB, the launch stage of the 3-stage rocket, detached from the spacecraft. However, the SIVB fell into an elliptical Earth orbit rather than the heliocentric orbit it was intended for. This error has since been attributed to incorrect trajectory data from a wonky tracking system. Luckily, the rest of the mission proceeded without a hitch. Conrad and Bean became the 3rd and 4th men to step foot on the moon, while Richard Gordon remained in lunar orbit aboard the Command and Service Module. The lunar pair performed various tasks, including sample collection and the recovery of portions of 1967's Surveyor 3 spacecraft. In total, Conrad and Bean spent a day and 7 hours on the moon and landed back on Earth on the 24th of November. A 30-year mystery Canadian astronomer, William Bill Young, was already a legend for discovering objects floating about in space. In 1999, he even had the outer main belt asteroid 4776 named Yungkwang-Yu after him. On the 3rd of September 2002, Jung spotted what appeared to be an undiscovered asteroid orbiting the Earth. The astronomy world was perplexed by this finding, as it was long held that the moon was the only large natural object that could remain in the Earth's orbit without being thrown out by perturbations. The logical conclusion was that the object, now labeled J02E3, had entered the orbital path fairly recently. Astronomers at the University of Arizona later dispelled the notion of the 30-meter-long J02E3 being an asteroid. This assertion was based on spectral observations that suggested the object was man-made and did not have absorption characteristics consistent with natural space rocks. Closer observation revealed aluminum casing, as well as the titanium dioxide paint that matched the Saturn V rockets of the late 60s and early 70s. To identify J02E3's specific mission, its orbital parameters were calculated, and it was soon discovered that the object had been orbiting the Sun since at least 1971, when it was last near the Earth. At first, this dating suggested J02E3 was part of Apollo 14, which had launched on the 31st of January 1971. However, this was clearly incorrect because NASA had purposefully crashed the launch vehicle of that mission into the moon for lunar seismic studies. Additionally, the space agency had accounted for all other parts of Apollo 14's Saturn V SA-509 rocket. Given that fact and the timeline of its path, the next logical deduction was that J02E3 was the SIVB, Apollo 12's SA-507 launch vehicle. Experts at the Maui Space Surveillance Complex, MSSC, carried photometric observations that showed that J02E3's calculated orbital path matched the light curve of an SIVB launch vehicle. A light curve is essentially a graph of a celestial object's light intensity against time. The main theory about how the SIVB ended up here is twofold. Firstly, the incorrect trajectory data diverted it away from the intended orbit around the Sun and into an elliptical orbit around Earth. Like with preceding Apollo missions, placing the launch vehicle firmly in a heliocentric orbit would safely get it out of the way of both the Earth and future space ventures. NASA, which was basing its decisions on the faulty tracking system, ended up overcorrecting the launcher's speed ever so slightly, but this would have a ripple effect. Secondly, the SIVB's ullage engines, which are responsible for propelling the vehicle after the main engines have cut off in zero gravity, burned for too long during launch. This ate up too much propellant, and the SIVB did not have enough power to push out of the Earth-Moon system and into heliocentric orbit. The discarded third stage would drift past the Moon on the 18th of November, 4 days after launch, before continuing in an unstable Earth orbit. The SIVB would meander from Earth to lunar orbits, depending on which of the two bodies exerted the greater gravitational pull at any given time. Experts believe that the SIVB continued in this shaky orbit for about 2 years before being ejected towards heliocentric orbit by gravitational perturbations in 1971. It is likely that the Sun's gravitational pull stole the third stage at Lagrange point 1, where the Sun and Earth's gravity cancel each other out. With no visual data to go off, NASA had no clue that the SIVB had not been discarded properly and was stuck in haphazard limbo. However, after 31 years, the launch vehicle was weakly recaptured into Earth's orbit and popped up as an anomaly on Young's telescope. The SIVB left Earth's orbit again sometime in June 2003 and, according to calculations, may come back into our orbit in the 2040s. However, there is also a chance it may crash land back to Earth, or even on the Moon. To date, 10 comparable SIVB launch stages have fallen back to Earth from low Earth orbit or ballistic trajectories. However, none have hit the planet's surfaces intact because they were burned and fragmented in the atmosphere upon re-entry. That said, the Apollo 12 SIVB would have significantly higher energy were it to fall to Earth from a heliocentric orbit. With that, we've reached the end of the video. Thank you again for watching, and we hope you learned something new about the history of space travel. Don't forget to like and share the video to help grow the channel, hit the subscribe button as well, and ding the bell to avoid missing out on new videos. Keep it locked here for more awesome videos about the cosmos. Bye for now.